Good morning, this is Steve Gladys from the George Mason Enterprise Center, and what we're talking about today is public presentations, something that all of us have to do at our jobs, whether we're supervisors, whether we're executives, it doesn't matter. It's required if you're going to be successful in your job to do presentations. Many times those presentations are before 6 to 10 people, sometimes they're toward larger groups, and we're talking today about the structure that you want to give this, no matter what the size of the audience is. We talked earlier in the structure of this organization. We talked about the introduction. Now we're going to talk about the body. And remember, we had in the introduction, we had attention. We talked about the need to know the theme and the preview. And in the preview, and the particular theme we had for this particular speech was George Mason University is a university for the 21st century. And we said we talked about three parts for it. Remember that it was the technology was important here, and entrepreneurship and alumni. Those three elements are the three elements that we would then use to structure our speech: technology, entrepreneurship, and alumni. And we could then we'll talk about each one of those segments. So think of each one of those segments as columns holding up the central idea, this introduction that we gave with the central idea or the thesis. So the whole idea here is to make sure that we present information in the body of the speech that's going to support each one of these three elements. Remember, technology, education, and alumni. And so we might start off with technology. When we start talking about technology, we're going to offer data in our speech. We're going to offer speech. We're going to offer data that is emotional. We're going to offer data that's logical and that's quantitative. And we're going to offer data that's emotional and personal. I have these backwards: personal and emotional. So, for example, when we're doing we're talking about technology, we're going to probably want to bring up information that is highly logical, that is database centered. We might want to give statistics. George Mason has so many technology classes available. We might want to talk about stories about maybe one of the students that took a course here and what happened to him when he graduated, those sorts of things. We will use, when, for example, you're talking to an audience that's a neutral audience, you want to use, you can use a lot of logos and some pathos, some emotion. Ethos, or your personal credibility, comes from your performance that day, and it also comes from your reputation. But reputation and performance are important. So, moving on, we go through the speech using data, using statistics, using stories, using case examples, and those sorts of things to prove our point. If you have an audience that agrees with you, you can use a lot of pathos. If you have an audience that you don't think agrees with you, you probably should use a lot of what's called logos or data. And in that data, always remember to use sources that come from reputable sources that would resonate with a particular audience. For example, if you're talking to a bunch of business guys, or men and women, use the Wall Street Journal or Forbes magazine or the Harvard Business Review. That's the body of the speech. That's the guts of the speech. Think of those three columns with data and information and logos and pathos holding up the central thing that you mentioned earlier on in the introduction. Thanks very much. This is Steve Gladys from George Mason University's Mason Enterprise Center.